Hi, this is Nathan Davis and Kevin Sonico here to present FollowTheSaints.com, a project for the Civil Engineering 594R Geoinformatics course at Brigham Young University, taught by Dr. Dan Ames. First, we're going to talk about the inspiration behind FollowTheSaints.com. Every 4 years in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in the Gospel Doctrine class, we learn about church history. Different points and cities are talked about as the pioneers left Nauvoo, Illinois, and made their way to Salt Lake City, Utah. There's many historical points that became very important to the saints and to the Latter-day Saints today as they studied and learned some of those things. The church has a good history website that has locations along the trail. But we noticed that we wanted to be able to see all those points on a map, interact with them, learn different things from each of those points, rather than this picture and the distance it was from Nauvoo. Now there is more information when you click on that, and we actually link to that in our map. So that was the problem we're looking at, is a better way to present this. Let's go to the site now and see how it looks. Here we have followthesaints.com. That's the URL you can type in your browser. Works best, we know, in Chrome and Firefox on Windows computers. When we first come to the page, you'll see the layout that is consistent throughout our site. Up here we have 4 buttons. Home, which is this page you're on. About takes you to a page that tells a little about us and about the site. Documentation, which doesn't have the documentation yet, but this will hold the user documents and the help files if there's any questions about the site. And finally, a contact us in case there's bugs or questions, or you just want to let us know something about the site. But let's go back to that home tab. Here in the middle we have our map. This is a map showing the United States right now. You'll see 2 lines representing different routes, as well as spinning wagon wheels that represent different points along the way. Over on the right, you'll notice our navigation so that you can go through those. As you see each of these points, you can click on it and it'll take you. There are 2 things you can't really see from this view, the city of Nauvoo and the city of Salt Lake, so we'll go ahead and click on that point. Here we see an outline of the city of Nauvoo, which is our first starting place along the trek west. As you click on each of these points, it'll take you to those different points. You can zoom in or out to get a better reference of where those points are. As you'll see, each of these are different points represented by the wagon wheel. There is no significance to the rate at which this wagon wheel is spinning. It's just representative of the pioneers and the wagons that they used as they headed west. You can see the different points all represented the same. Some of these are marked on the rock or on the map as well, and some of them are very close to each other, as you can see right there. Finally, we end up in Salt Lake City. If you just want to see the route that the pioneers took from Nauvoo to Salt Lake, you can click and see that route from Nauvoo to Salt Lake. Also, a large group of men along the way were sent to fight for the United States. And they took a route here that we've illustrated on our map as the Mormon Battalion route. We also have some controls that you can see all of the points, or you can clear the map and just use it like you would, say, Google Maps to look up different points.
And finally, one of the most important features of our map is that when you go to one of the points, you can click on that point and you'll get a pop-up with the name, a picture, a little explanation, and then there's a link to that page we started out on LDS.org so that you can find out more information. That'll open up in a new tab for you. If we go back here, you can click out, go to any one of these points. If we click on there, same information will pop up in a similar sized box. Alright, now that we've seen the map and what it can do, we're going to go through the code quickly and just point out a few of the things that we did. This is the index page of our HTML, so it has HTML head. We chose to write our JavaScript within the index head, so there's not a separate file. It could easily be a separate file. But we do reference the open layers JavaScript at first. That's what works all the magic behind the map and allows us to be able to use that and manipulate that. We also reference our styles sheet. Talk about that real briefly in just a second. Things that were used more than once we put in a separate CSS file. Other things we just put the style in this index file. First we created the key for the map, our variables that we'd use throughout this map, and then we start with our initial function, where this is getting the map ready, and on the page we're creating a map as a variable, adding controls to it. Then we're going to add the different base maps, road, hybrid, and aerial, adding those using our API key. Then we're going to add a layer for each KML file. We ended up having to break those into separate files, so there are quite a few. Each one has a variable that's defined, given a name, Chimney Rock, and then it's linked to where its KML file is on our server. That's in a KML folder /chimney.kml. And then that's done, as I said, for each of the KML points. As we scroll through that real quickly. Then we add those layers to the map by map.addLayers, each of those variables that we just defined. We set the base layer to the road view. This allows us to see those spinning wagon wheels real clearly. And then we set the center and zoom to that level in the middle of the United States. The select controls, this is what allows us to select the points. So we turn those on for each of those layers, set some of the settings, and then we turn on the events for each layer. Again, each layer has to have its events turned on. And when a feature is selected, it runs our function onFeatureSelect. And when it's unselected, it runs the onFeatureUnselect function. And Kevin will describe those in just a second. Again, that's done for each of the layers. Then we add map.addControlSelect, select, and activate. We're going to take a step aside. This is a different function called setPlace. This is for when you're clicking those buttons over on the right side. We write to the log just so we know what's going on. And then for each of the layers, it cycles through. And when you click that button, it's passed a variable called choice. And so it cycles through each of the 16 layers with that choice and says, is that layer the choice that you just clicked? And if it is, it turns the visibility on, sets the extents, and zooms to those extents.
I'm going to talk about our pop-ups function that we have on here. So you can see on our main index HTML code, we start with this pop-up close function. Basically, we're starting with this event because we want the pop-ups to be closed as soon as the site is loaded, so that we can actually click on our KML points to have a pop-up show up whenever we do that. A few lines down, you can see this is our feature handler, which adds a pop-up whenever we click on a KML site. So we start with our function, which is onFeatureSelect. The event, you can remember when we were creating our variables up top, they were the sites.event. And this function pulls up those events on there, so that's how it's tied together. The variable is a feature, which equals the event.feature to call it up. And the content just under here is a variable that picks up some of the attributes that we have in each of those pop-ups. The title, the picture, the description, and our link that we have connected to the bottom. The content.search is just ending our pop-up on there. whenever we click outside of a pop-up, we want that to close, and we also want the X button in the top right corner to close it. So the last part of it is when we're clicking out of the pop-up, we want it to close. So this function on feature unselect event, variable feature equals event dot feature, feature dot popup, and we want it to delete the feature whenever we click outside. So this delete feature dot popup at the end and the destroy function will take care of that.
One last thing before we get to the actual HTML code. That's this little part right here. It says remove the Bing logo from the map. The Bing logo kept showing up in a spot that wasn't ideal, not in the bottom corner, and so we moved it up about 1,000 pixels. So technically it's still there, and technically we're still giving credit to Bing and their copyrights. You just don't see it, but it's there, and so we appreciate them and their support of our educational needs. But as we get down here, we get to the body of the page. You'll notice that when the page loads, we load that function init, which sets up the map for us. We have a couple div IDs that format this map for us, and divs within divs that help us do that. So that's what that is, this little part right here. These are links to our other pages, the about, documentation, and contact us. Then we have that map div, that's where the map is. And then we have the column over to the right, and its kind of settings. And then those buttons that you can click on. We have our little footer that has our copyright notice. We end all our divs, end our body, and that's the end of our HTML code.
This KML file is called Pioneer Points. It's just a directory that holds all these different points in it. So when we call up Pioneer Points, it can look in there and see. So I'll go over this first ID. This is what is this? Chimney Rock. So the name just at the top here is Chimney Rock. That's what's going to show up in our pop-up. The image URL is where we'll get the picture for it. If you remember, it calls it up from the JavaScript, and then this tells it where to go. Our width, we made all of them 430 pixels. That's just a quick string right there to include. Text 1 is our description of the site. Text 2 is our link to lds.org. If you wanted to learn more, just click on that. And everything else is, this is just style.
Real quickly, we'll just show our CSS file. Pretty much this is standard. As we said, the things that were used more than once we put in here. Just wanted to point out one of my favorite things that we used on the website were those buttons over on the right. We formatted those with that dark blue color, but as you hover over them, it changes the border to none, the background to a little bit lighter blue, and adds that shadow and changes the hand cursor to a hand. That's not just the hover, but that's just anytime you're over it. And so that was one of my favorite features that we did in the CSS. Alright, and that's it for followthesaints.com. We invite you to come visit us. Again, that URL is followthesaints.com. I'm Nathan Davis, working with Kevin Sonico. This site was again created as part of the Civil Engineering 594R Geoinformatics course at Brigham Young University. Thanks for watching.